This is my review of the Neat Acoustics Ministra stand mount HiFi speakers, and this is actually the 17th stand mount HiFi speaker, costing around the same kind of price point that I've reviewed in recent months. And you would think after 16 or 17 different speakers you would have seen everything, but nope. This is definitely a different type of speaker, and I would actually say it's the curveball speaker of the current group test. In this review, I will be comparing the Ministra to speakers 1 to 6 in the test. So that's the Dynaudio EVOKE 20, the Sonus faber Sonetto II, the JBL 4309, the JBL HDI 1600, the Arendal 1723, and the Quad Z2. And boy, that's some crazy stiff competition. Let's begin. The Neat Ministra cost £1,795. They are a very modest sized, actually the smallest speaker in this group test. Two-way rear ported stand mount speaker that features not one, but two 134mm or 5 and a bit inch mid-bass drivers in a regulated Iso-baric design. And this means there are two mid-bass drivers working together, with one of them being fully inside the enclosure. Also interesting is the 50mm true ribbon tweeter. And even more interesting is the front baffle, because it's separated from the main enclosure with a polyethylene membrane. The Ministra are made here in the UK. They are 4 ohms and rated to 100 watts with an 86 decibel sensitivity. There is something very important to stress with the Neat Ministra speakers. These are speakers designed to be placed very close to your wall, your front wall. And if you look in the instructions, it's suggested to start with them at a distance of about 20 centimeters, which is about 8 inches. And I know us men, we generally exaggerate for distance. And I generally, or think I've been placing speakers very close to my front wall throughout this group test, and throughout the whole time actually I've been in that room. But when I measured, the speakers were actually 40 centimeters from the front wall to the back of the speaker. So do factor that in. 20 centimeters is only a very short distance, and the Ministra do need to be placed very close to the front wall. But for audiophiles that have that need that, where that works for them, well, that makes this already a very interesting and compelling speaker. My initial listening impressions of the Ministra are a little mixed, because I spent a lot of time listening to them non-serious while I was putting some hours on them. And straight away I could sense they are a well-behaved speaker with a lot of high frequency energy. Initially they were a little bit squeaky in the treble. They definitely had a new speaker sound. But I'm glad to report that by the end of the review that was largely gone, and the main speakers I used for this review didn't have the full 200 hours on them as is suggested for a full running. But by chance I ended up with a second set, this time finished in black, which I actually think is a really nice finish, and these were running, so I got to hear the difference. Even when fairly fresh out of the box, the Ministra had some very impressive standout characteristics. One major one was their speed and liveliness, and I measured them as part of a full Dirac Live calibration, and their in my room response really surprised me. In the main, this is a very well behaved speaker. There is a bit of a dip, I assume, in the crossover region, but it's small enough to not really be of any major significance. And below 7 kHz, there is not really too much to talk about. But above 7 kHz, we have a whopping rise in the treble. And what's interesting is when you look at that measurement, you think, wow, I'm going to need mushrooms in my ears to be able to listen to these speakers, but that's really not the case at all. But it does give you an indication, I think, of their overall tonal balance. If we compare to the Sonus faber Sonetto II, because they also had a bit of a treble peak, I suppose a better comparison would be with the Quad Z2, another ribbon tweeter that measured with a little bit of character, but still again nothing like the Ministra. And I double checked my measurements were correct by taking them a second time and measuring the run-in set, and it was all very much the same. Going back to the Sonetto II comparison, and this time looking at the bass, the speakers look quite similar in terms of their output, but in practice the Sonetto II definitely sounded more substantial in their bass. But again, I think this is because maybe I didn't have the Ministra just close enough to the front wall. And I wanted to clarify this because for this group test I've been using the exact same speaker stands in the exact same position in my room with the exact same hi-fi system, just trying to keep everything as much the same as possible so that all I was literally changing was the speakers, just to try and help me identify the differences. And obviously I could have tried to push the Ministra further back, but then I would have been tucking them in very tight against the big subwoofers that I have in my room, and I felt that would probably be worse rather than better in terms of their performance. And because the speakers are very close to a corner, they are definitely being boundary loaded, or they are still getting a lot of room reinforcement. So either way, this might not be perfect for these speakers, so I've definitely taken this into account for their assessment for this review. But let's start by talking about the bass, which is a strong and maybe a weaker point of the Ministra. It's a strong point because their bass is very tight, agile and fast. But compared to some of the other speakers in this group test, the output definitely is perceived as less, especially when we compare to say the Dynaudio EVOKE 20 or the Arendal 1723. Both of these speakers are a lot larger, but cost around the same and give you much bigger bass. And that's definitely different strokes for different folks. Not every audiophile is going to want this big bass, hence why they might buy a smaller stand mount speaker in the first place. But moving on to the Ministra's biggest strength, which I think is their very precise sound with a very precise open soundstage. And providing I wasn't too greedy with the volume, I have been enjoying a very clear and well-defined soundstage with very impressive width and great height actually for a smaller speaker, and the Ministra sound fast and highly resolving. The treble is very precise, clear and present. Not really anything like as present as you might think from those measurements, but you know it's there, and it's definitely more present and crispy sounding than quite a few of the other speakers here. Similar to the Quad Z2, the ribbon tweeter is lightning fast, and there is a lot of higher frequency energy that gives the overall soundstage life and air and makes it pop and sound free of the speakers. And vocals are similarly delivered clean and crisp with just about enough tonal saturation to be satisfying. I think a lot of audiophiles will really like the Ministra's delivery of vocals, firstly because of how spacious they are presented or in space free of the speakers, and secondly because of how fast they are, very start-stop. Other audiophiles might find the vocals a little underbloomed in the lower registers. Bigger male vocals sounded more solid on some of the other speakers tested here, like the JBL HDI 1600 or Quad Z2. But again, maybe a closer to the wall placement would have made a difference. But thinking about it, the Ministra are very transparent sounding speakers. Very rarely did they call attention to themselves or pull me out of the music for the wrong reasons. That doesn't mean everything sounded perfect or that they are suited to every music genre, but for how they delivered their sound, I could just soak it up and just sit and listen to it. And if I had to clarify their sound, I'm definitely struggling to liken them to any of the other speakers here in this group test, hence my comment about them being the curveball speaker. And thinking maybe back to all of the speakers, all the stand mount speakers of that 17 that I've looked at recently, they probably reminded me most of the KEF LS50 Meta because they have a very precise and crisp sound. Crisp, clean, leading edges of transients, again like the LS50 Meta, but they sound more lively up top because of the more lively high frequencies top end and the speed of the ribbon. The analytical side of my brain is definitely telling me to tell you to think carefully about your hi-fi system components to try and make sure you match them up really well for these speakers and get the right overall sound balance. It's also telling me to maybe suggest that an amplifier that has a bit of power would be important, but also one that's on the more richer, maybe on the more warmer and smoother side as an amplifier would probably be my suggested point to start. So Neat Ministra is a very interesting speaker because it's the only speaker of all 17 that I've looked at in recent months that is designed to be placed close to the wall, and I think probably in a smaller room. And for that audiophile, obviously the Ministra are very compelling, especially if that audiophile is looking for a very discreet, compact speakers that I think look really nice. There is also something very reassuring about their build quality that stands out. The Ministra feel handmade by a man in Durham and not mass made by a factory by a team in China. And I mean that with no disrespect to either, it's just the impression you get from them. And for me that stands out mostly when you look at the rear with the countersunk screw holes compared to say the screwless design of the EVOKE 20. There definitely is a real charm about the Ministras in terms of build quality, in my opinion. And if you are an audiophile that likes a speaker that's all about clarity and precision and liveliness from a very compact package, that is what the Ministra gives you. You could easily have these in an apartment and not worry about upsetting your neighbours or your wife, come to think of it. But if you like me and you really crave dynamics, then there's still a lot to like about the Ministra, but I think some of the other speakers in this group test give you overall dynamics better, and especially bass dynamics better. From larger packages, let's not forget that important difference. So like all things in hi-fi, it depends on your home setup and personal requirements. I heard a lot here that I liked with the Ministra, but I think their larger speakers in the Neat Strata range, like the new Magistra or maybe the Orchestra, would suit me, my room and needs better. And that leaves just one more speaker in this group test, the System Audio Legend 5.2. And it's at this point I have to say a huge apology, because unfortunately I've been really quite unwell with a bad cold and haven't been able to hear anything actually for about the last week, which means I've actually run out of time for this group test, because there's something really big planned for next week, something that's been planned for months. So if you was looking forward to the System Audio Legend 5.2 speaker review, I can only apologise to you, and I have to apologise to System Audio and to Karma AV, the UK distributor, for not being able to deliver obviously on my promise. It's just one of those things, I can't really do much about it. So that means that is this group test kind of wrapped up. All there is now is to create a conclusion for it and to announce one of these speakers as the best stand mount speaker under £2,000. And I wonder which one you think is the best. Let me know down in the comments section. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful and helpful. As always, if you did, hit the thumbs up button. And if you're new here, maybe subscribe to the Pursuit of Perfect System YouTube channel and hit the notification bell, because you don't want to miss any of the videos. There's always lots more content on its way. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.